So welcome all. We're waiting for a few minutes to have a few more of our CAC members join. And Adrian, one of the things maybe what you could do is check to see if people that are possibly our CAC members are over on the not as panelists. Because sometimes we get two different invites, and one of them is for the panelists for us, and one is the public side, but they're hard to tell the difference.
Right.
So sometimes it's people can end up on the other side and not realize.
Okay, there we are. They got me on. That's the community advisory. Okay, I'm here.
Yep, we haven't started yet, Cynthia. We're waiting for a few more. Although we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. All right, 12. Okay. I think we are.
Now, I think that I have some attendees here, alternates. Let me just do a quick check.
So Adrian, you're going to check something, or are we ready to go?
Just give me 1 second.
Okay.
1 minute. Okay. We have 3 people who can take the oath of office today.
Okay, so what I'd like to do first, though, is welcome everybody to the June 14th Community Advisory Committee for EVCE, and I'd like to have roll call, please.
Yes. Hold on 1 second.
Okay.
Right. Eldridge. Member Eldridge.
Thank you.
Eldridge. Laundry.
Here.
Frank.
Present.
My apologies. Yes. Member Lou.
Present.
Member Padilla.
Present.
Member Pacheco.
Present.
Member Butzenberg.
Present.
Vice Chair Frank.
Present.
And Chair Sutter.
Present.
Now we also have Member Swaminathan.
Present.
Though you'll need to take the oath of office before you're official member. Member Longshaman. And Member Talria.
Present.
We have a quorum.
So Adrian, did you call Kate Duggan?
Kate Duggan, because the member is present, I didn't call the alternate.
Okay, so because this will be some of the first times we've had both the regular member and the alternate. As alternate, you're more listening in than participating a whole lot. You should not vote if we have one area where we're going to vote or have a motion. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the oath of office for the 3 members that I think you indicated needed to.
Yes. So Lisa Hugh, Shiva, and Priya. If you could repeat after me. I, your name.
I, Shiva.
I, Lisa Who.
Do solemnly swear.
Do
Do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California
and the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
That I will bear the true faith and allegiance
That I will bear the true faith and allegiance
to the Constitution of the United States
to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California.
and the Constitution of the State of California.
That I take this obligation freely,
That I take this obligation freely,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any
Mental
reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I'm about to enter.
and that I will well and favorably discharge the duties with which I'm about to enter.
Thank you very much. You're now members of CSC.
Great, thank you, and welcome officially to everyone. So our next item is item C3, which are public comments. The public always has the ability to address the committee on any EBC related matter that's not on our agenda. Do we have any speaker slips?
Yes, we do. We have one speaker slip from Alita Dupree.
Okay.
I am going to recognize Alita Dupree. Oh, 1 second. For 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Mary Sutter and committee members. Alita Dupree for the record. My pronouns are she and her. Always good to be back with you. EBC is important, and it's really hot outside. And I used my induction hot plate, made tomato sauce, and didn't get the kitchen very hot. So we want to work on our kitchen and other building electrification. Very, very helpful. We should find out what the cigarette equivalent is of air with emissions from gas cooking equipment, whether it be in homes and in restaurants and institutions, especially when such equipment is running all day, all the time. Puts a lot of stuff into the air that isn't very good to have. So time of use is essential. Because it's so hot out, I don't want to add heat to the house. And so I learned to do my cooking in the morning so the air conditioner doesn't have to work so hard. The time of use is a good way to save money. And so with electric rates as high as they are in California, and you at EBC are doing a good job on the generation side of lowering the cost of electricity. There's plenty more that can be done. Solar and storage, as I've said before, are essential, and being able to gain the kilowatt hours that would otherwise be curtailed, because curtailment is still a problem, and that's just wasted energy. And we want that because it's much cheaper than burning fossil fuels. So I think that we have to continue to be active in our work of not just selling kilowatt hours, but as I've advocated to you before, that I believe that a destiny for EBCE should be as a municipal utility district to be able to get into the business of transmission and distribution. And I believe that we have the expertise in our executive team to be able to do that kind of work. Because I do believe in the idea of public power, because it gives me a chance to come to meetings like this and speak and share what's on my mind. Lots of things happening with electric vehicles, and so equity is essential to be able to invest in electric vehicles that the public is able to freely access, to be able to have charging that is easily accessible, that one doesn't have to keep put in their garages, but is freely available to the public. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. There are no more public speakers.
Great, thank you. One of the things that I was realizing is Anna Olivia is not here. So I would like to elevate Lisa Hu as to be active and be a member in today's call as opposed to your alternate role. If Anna Olivia does show up, we might have to put you back the other way, but I did hear from her prior to this that she may not make it. She was going to try, if so, she'd be late, and it's possible she wasn't going to make it at all. So Lisa, consider yourself a member. Nick?
Mary, I think and this is something we do with the board, but typically if a member doesn't, there's a sort of a threshold point at which and some of it has to do with stipends and whatnot. So we don't give a stipend for partial. It's sort of, I think if Lisa's going to be the representative, I think like roll call it and she'll be here. Unless there's like unless there's some like exigent circumstance around like Anna Olivia's like, I really want to vote on an item.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's just a good policy to sort of, if somebody doesn't make it, especially if we
usually give them like 15 minutes or
yeah,
something.
Yeah. I think that's fine. But I think at some point in time, there should be a cutoff, and some of that has to just do for our own purposes for determining whether or not, which of the two receives the stipend. We need to kind of have that like cutoff moment. So whether it could be 10 or 20. I mean, the period of time is less important than just like there's a threshold at which.
All right.
Yeah.
So that's good to know. I think for us, given people's timelines, I'm going to give it 15 minutes. So we'll give it a few more minutes and then we'll call it. But for now, we're waiting for Aunt Olivia. So let me move on to the next agenda item, which is the approval of minutes from May 17th. Anybody?
Move approval.
Okay. So did you get that, Monica? Do I have a second?
Yeah, I can second.
Great, thank
Who
you.
was the first? May I ask who the first
Monica.
Member Padilla?
Yeah, Monica, yeah. And second by Member Lou.
Great.
So do we have any discussion on these notes?
Can you see my hand up?
I can. Thank you, Cynthia.
Oh, really? It really isn't up? Really?
No, it's up. I can see it.
Oh,
I
okay.
failed to look.
Okay.
That was on me. So
Okay. Yeah. I don't have any discussion on the minutes. I've read them and I support the minutes. I just wanted to make a comment regarding the time off. The time. Regarding the members, the CAC members to show up. My recollection was the cutoff was 7:30. That's what it was in the past.
So we gave them a half an hour?
Yes, that's my understanding. That's what who's the previous person? Her name escapes me.
Aunt Olivia?
Not Aunt Olivia, the previous secretary to Adrian, the person that just left.
Stephanie.
Stephanie, yes. Yeah, the cutoff was 7:30. That was my understanding.
Okay. Well, considering that I don't remember one way or another, we're going to let it float for a little bit, but thank you, Cynthia.
Of course, yes.
And I am looking, I see no other hands raised. So can we have a roll call vote on the minutes, please?
Yes, Member Landry. Member Landry? Are you muted?
Yes.
Thank you. Member Hugh.
Approve.
I didn't get that. Can you please repeat your vote?
Yes, sorry. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Aye.
Yes, thank you. Member Lou.
Approve. Yes.
Member Duggan.
Do I vote here?
Wait,
You said she was alternate today.
Yeah, I'm alternate.
Member Padilla, I have my notes.
Approved, yes.
Member Swamathon,
I think I abstain. I was not at the meeting.
abstain.
Yes.
Member Tauria,
Abstain. I wasn't at the meeting.
Member Pacheco,
Abstain.
Member Mutzenberg,
Aye.
Vice Chair Frank,
Yes.
and Chair Sutter.
Yes,
The motion passes.
thank you. All right, moving on to item C5, which is my chair report. I just have a few things, a couple logistics to remind people of that are new on the CAC. Is that kind of different from how some of these Zoom calls may be done in a business type setting? Is we should not use the chat function, especially to talk about anything that we're discussing. The chat function is only seen by the panelists and not the broad set of attendees and participants, so it is not public. So we can't be using that chat function to talk about anything. The second thing is to remember to mute yourself. I think that's everybody's kind of used to doing that when you're not talking. And third thing, I wanted to remind people that there have been some special meetings that are all specific to what EBCE does. They're really good webinars in terms of getting basic information. If you go to the public meetings website space on EBCE and then go down and filter on special meetings, you'll see the 4 special meetings that have taken place once a month over the past 4 months. So I just wanted to make sure everybody was aware of that as a resource for panelists and folks listening in as attendees, if you haven't heard of that one before. And lastly, today is Monica Padilla's last day on the CAC. She has been an outstanding member of the CAC since it began, and 4 years ago. She was a member of the 2 years on the standing committee prior to that. She's given a lot of her time and effort in helping ensure that EBCE is moving forward. And I know that we'll miss her voice, but I appreciate all the time that you've given. So and Monica, if you want to say anything, you certainly can. Don't feel you have to.
No, I could speak, and not usually a problem. So yeah, I was part of it when the county started to look at forming EBCE, so the steering committee, which was 2 years prior to actual launch. So it was exciting then. It continues to be exciting. As some of you know, I actually work for a community choice aggregator, Silicon Valley Clean Energy. So I will always know what's going on at EBCE. There's a lot of exciting things. I'm very, very excited that today is my last day, and it's Shiva Swaminathan's first day, as I had the pleasure of working with Shiva for over 20 years at the city of Palo Alto. And I feel like I'm passing the baton to Shiva. So hopefully he takes the baton and runs with it. So yes, it's been a lot of fun working with Ernesto and Cynthia and Jane and you, Mary, and everybody else who's been here since the beginning. So thank you for listening to me for the last 4 years. And thank you, staff, for all the great work that you've done in the presentations and the reports and the discussions.
Great.
Monica, I'm still trying to get my camera working, but I'm giving you clapping emojis right now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Right on.
Thank you, Ernie.
Great, thank you. All right, we're going to move on to item C6, which is the legislative update. I will say that, what we have here and what I had on the agenda, we're probably going to shorten that substantially and not need to go much into this. This ended up being put onto the consent calendar for the board. It's only covering one item that had been requested to be reviewed and have a position taken on it. So I think, Nick, were you going to present and talk about this particular item for us?
So this item is AB 1139, which is an assembly bill that would put in place some legislative parameters around the Public Utilities Commission's net energy metering docket that's currently ongoing. The California Public Utilities Commission is currently evaluating a successor to net energy metering. And this bill would have basically force the PUC to adopt certain specific changes if the PUC fails to adopt a successor tariff by August 1, 2022. This bill did not pass the assembly, but because this is the first year of a 2-year legislative session, the author did reserve the right to bring the bill back next session with some advantages relative to introducing a new bill. But the fundamental point is this bill will not be considered again this legislative session. And the recommendation is to take an opposed position to this bill.
All right, thank you, Nick. Adrian, do we have any public comment on this before we go back to the committee for any thoughts?
There are no public comments for this item.
I do see Audrey's
Oh, I
hand.
do see, yes. I can recognize Audrey for 3 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Adrian. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, everyone. Yes, AB 39 didn't make it out of the committee this session. And I think one of the takeaways is really how broad support there is for rooftop solar. So I know we're going to be PG&E and is going to try again to revise, have very to undermine rooftop solar. But we'll be ready. But what I wanted to say was that it really showed broad support for rooftop solar. And what I hope that EBCE's legal department is looking forward to now is to really work on the reform of Public Utility Code 218, which is the paragraph that makes it extremely difficult, if not impossible, to aggregate behind the meter solar, rooftop solar. So I hope that the legal team will address this, try to bring about change in that area, because it's really important for EBCE, for all customers, low income as well, and for EBCE programs for resource adequacy, demand response, all of the programs that benefit from the aggregation of rooftop solar, including microgrid resilience hubs. So for all of these reasons, really, I hope that EBCE takes a very proactive view of this changing field and not just focus solely on revisions to NEM, what will be NEM 3.0. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Audrey. And I see a couple more hands going up on the public side.
Yes. Hold on 1 second. I am recognizing Jessica Tovar for 3 minutes.
Hello, this is Jessica Tovar from East Bay Clean Power Alliance. And I felt compelled to comment on this because certainly AB 1139 thought to secure it. This is pretty much an attack from the monopoly utilities to secure their monopoly. And I really see this really killing local solar, which is what we are clearly advocating for in terms of like solution to both climate change, the jobs issue, and really uplifting communities of color. You know, all the programs that environmental justice communities have advocated for, like solar on multi-affordable housing. And then the other projects that I know Audrey mentioned, you know, we're advocating for microgrids, islandable solar and battery storage for our resilience hubs in the light of these, you know, planned power shutoffs and the many crises that we're living in right now. And for that reason, we do, you know, want to encourage East Bay Community Energy to be a leader in making sure that we don't lose policies that benefit local solar, but that we're also advancing, strengthening local solar, you know, solutions in our community. And so, yeah, I just wanted to say that. And then one of the other things is there is an expectation that similar language could come up in terms of gut and amend before this legislative year is over. And we do expect if that doesn't happen this year, that we will see another bill like this come January, and we need to be prepared, and we need to have a strong opposition from our community choice program. And that's it. Clean power to the people. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jessica. Vaughn?
Yeah, this is display my ignorance. Doesn't EBCE actually get some benefit, economic benefit by having NEM customers in their collection? Isn't that less energy you have to buy from somebody else type of thing? Isn't there some, either indirectly or directly, some savings to the whole by some of the people having NEM? And could that be a reason that PG&E is also going after it because it's a revenue source they can't get a hold of?
So I'm not sure that we can answer that for you right
Okay,
here,
thanks.
Vaughn. I'm sorry about that, but I think that it's something that you're feel free to actually ask via email on any of the staff. So I see no more hands on the attendee side, but I do see Monica.
Yeah, I guess question to Nick or to JR. It's a little confusing because I think I've seen EBCE bring some stuff to this body and I think to the board as well, where you've actually kind of made the opposite argument that the NEM policies as they exist right now are unfavorable to those who don't participate in solar or have rooftop. And so there's a little bit of inequity that happens with NEM. And so to me, is it that you oppose the nature of the bill being very prescriptive? Because the staff report makes it seem as though you guys are opposing it because it doesn't support EBCE's decarbonization goals, but you can adopt any NEM policy you want to, right? I mean, you don't have to adopt the same policy that the CPUC requires. So on the one hand, I've heard arguments that you guys have made that this is a subsidy, NEM, and you've actually reformed your NEM program. But then I'm hearing differently here that you like the lucrative NEM program. So if you can just elaborate a little bit on that.
Yeah, sure. I think some of the primary reasons for taking the oppose here have to do, one, with the treatment of the existing NEM customer base. We have 25 to 30,000 customers that have rooftop solar systems. And currently those customers, would not be subject to a change in NEM policy. So, if you installed your rooftop solar system 3 years ago or 5 years ago or 7 years ago, you have certain rights. You have rights related to being able to stay on the rate that you went on when the system was installed, rights related to avoiding grid charges. And so one of the things that this bill did that I think was concerning to us was it eroded those protections for existing net metering customers. You know, somebody goes out and spends $10, $20, $50,000, or a business or a school district spends a lot of money or commits to a long-term contract for solar under the premise that they're going to save money, and suddenly this legislation would have upended that. So like, for instance, we could have seen many of the schools that have installed solar in the East Bay who are currently saving 10, 15, 20% even on their electricity bills, suddenly paying 10, 15, 20% more on their electricity bills, because they would have to not only service the cost of the solar, but they would have to pay their full PG&E bill because of these grid charges. So that was one of the
So it's the grid charges that we're concerned that they're.
I think for me, the main concerns that I have with both the bill, but also many of the proposals that are currently under consideration of the PUC are the grid charges that would create a really significant barrier, frankly, to future adoption, and don't really align with state policies in my view. I think if you're assigning, if you set a precedent that you're going to assign grid charges to rooftop solar, it's not a very extending those grid charges to anybody who installs energy efficiency or to electrification measures. You say, well, hey, if you're electrifying, you're not using as much natural gas, so you're going to have a gas grid charge that's going to be applied. It's just an awful precedent from my perspective.
So it's that it would put a new fixed charge on the bill.
A new and unique fixed charge. This is not a fixed charge that would apply to any customers but the solar customer.
All right. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Monica. Ernie?
I just want to, so I didn't attend the meetings or interact with the staff while they were coming to a decision on 1139. It doesn't sound from what Nick just said that one of the factors that was taken into consideration was the fact that actually residential rooftop solar saves the grid money. So the underlying point of the entire bill, or the proposed or the purported underlying point of the bill, in which there is a subsidy from all grid users to those who have residential solar, has actually been disproved or contested by 2 reports. If that wasn't part of your considerations, I will send that in to Adrian to be added to the record, because the reason that I opposed it and a lot of other people opposed it was because the underlying principle of the bill was untrue, or would be untrue according to the 2 reports, that it actually saves the grid money. So I will send that to Adrian. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ernie. So I see no other hands for us. And Ernie, don't forget to put your hand down, or else I'll forget to ask you again when you really want to say something. All right. Cynthia, I see your hand going up.
Yes, I know the bill is obviously not going anywhere this year, but I presume that we will be following this bill into the next legislative session in 2022, or that would be my request, that we continue to monitor this bill next year also, and report back.
Yep. Thank you, Cynthia. I would assume, Nick, that this one made it on the bill tracker.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think part of the rationale for taking an opposed position to a 2-year bill is now we have a formal position, so we necessarily will track it in a way we would not track a bill if we were not taking a formal position.
Okay, seeing no other hands, I'm going to move us on to item C7. This is our item C6, just to remind folks, this is on the consent calendar for the board coming up on Wednesday. And for us, it was an informational item. So this is just a FYI type of thing. So I'm going to move on to item C7, which is our discussion of the budget. We saw a draft budget last month, and this is now coming back in front of the board on Wednesday for action. And so for us, I would also like us to take action and consider as we move forward with this and hear what staff has to say, how we want to support or changes or not for this. So for us, this is an action item. And Nick, is this you again, or is this someone else?
Yeah, this will be me.
Great, thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna probably move through most of the budget pretty quickly so that we spend most of the time on the local development slides. Certainly, if your preference is, with that in mind, it might make sense for board members to jump in if you have specific questions, or you want me to slow down and touch on something. So maybe that if you want me to slow down and sort of dig into something, let me know. Otherwise, I'm just going to sort of plow through to get to local development, which has been the area of relatively more interest for the board, at least. Okay. So next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide. So let's go to slide 4. Right. Sorry, I have a. Okay, so for this fiscal year, we are at the highlight. We are projecting a. No, actually, sorry. Can I go to the next slide, please? So slide 5. Just this is probably a better way to start. So at the highest level, we're projecting no change to our value proposition, so currently we offer customers a 1% discount, all customers a 1% discount relative to PG&E. So we are proposing to maintain that value proposition going into the next fiscal year. We are also proposing to make no change to our power content. So right now we seek for our Bright Choice customers to be 5% more renewable than PG&E. Through the balance of 2021, we'll offer our Bright Choice product, which is 100% carbon-free energy at price parity with PG&E. That product will be closing at the end of the year. And then our third product is 100% renewable, which is a penny more a kilowatt hour than PG&E. So for the average residential customers, that's going to be $6 to $10 a month in premium to be 100% California renewable energy. From this current year to the next year, we're seeing pretty significant year-over-year revenue growth, largely driven by the addition of 3 new communities. So early this year, or not the middle of 2020, the beginning of, I guess, April, we started serving Tracy, Pleasanton, and Newark. And so, this fiscal year represents a full year of revenue from those 3 new communities, which, they reflect about a 10 to 15% increase in load. So roughly a 10 to 15% increase in revenue. We are projecting a just over $15 million surplus through the year, which represents roughly a 3% net margin on expenses. We are seeing an increasing energy price environment for the year, which is driving up our energy costs relative to last year, but we have also seen higher revenues. Those higher revenues are somewhat mitigated by the rising PCIA, but and this is not reflected because the information only became available on Friday. These projections have been further validated by the PG&E's June 2021 energy resource forecast, where they forecast the PCIA and their rates for 2022. So those forecasts have largely validated our recognition that the PCIA, while it continues to go up, PG&E rates are continuing to go up as well, reflecting those higher energy prices, which supports the fact that we are able to continue to generate margin while being less expensive. We do, so going kind of through the line items, one of the main areas in our last fiscal year kind of uncertainty was were uncollectibles. So those are the charges for customers who have not been able to pay their utility bills. This is our utility debt, which we're going to talk about both in our local programs and as another item. Last year, we had forecast $9.9 million, and it's turned out to be marginally higher than that, a little over $10 million. And so this coming year, we are continuing to forecast uncollectibles. We're seeing that drop, though. We're forecasting a drop. This current fiscal year, we'd forecast a 2.5% uncollectible rate. So for the next fiscal year, we're projecting it to be 2% for the first 6 months and 1.5% for the second 6 months of the year. From a personnel perspective, we are seeking to increase our staff. I'll speak to that a little bit later. A lot of that has to do with increasing staff and reducing our reliance on outside consultants. We are also increasing things like software spend and reducing consultant spend as we're insourcing work and we're licensing tools for our staff. Kind of the other big thing to point to is a capital expense. We are seeking to buy an office building. And we are setting aside up to $5.5 million in this current fiscal year to cover a down payment on such a building. Okay. Next slide, please. So this is just a little bit of a highlight of how things have gone this year, this current fiscal year. And so for many of you, these are going to be new numbers and not things that you've really dug into. We did experience a sort of stronger financial year than we had expected, largely due to the fact that there was a deferral in the power charge and difference adjustment increases. That deferral is being amortized over over 2021, 2, and 3. So that has led to higher current year revenues, but some relatively lower revenues in future years because of a higher relative PCIA through amortization. We are actually taking about $15 million from this current year and putting it into a revenue deferral account to help ensure that we have sufficient funds in future years to pay for that amortized PCIA. As I mentioned, our uncollectibles ended up being a little bit higher than 2.5%, but not, meaningfully so. Probably a little bit closer, a little towards 3%, but not significant. So we have seen higher energy costs, but overall, a pretty favorable year, all things considered. So let's go to slide 8, Adrian. So for our current fiscal year, for our upcoming fiscal year, we are assuming 5% opt-outs for our 3 new communities. So you see the highest level of customer opt-outs typically during that period of time when you're bringing new communities on. So that's where we are. So far, we're seeing opt-outs just a tick under that 5%. So we're finding that that's probably a pretty accurate reflection of things. Yeah, I sort of spoke to the 2.5% to 2 to 1.5% uncollectible. So we'll move on. Why don't we go to slide 10? So here you sort of see a cost breakdown of our projected energy costs. We're expecting $450 million of energy expense. Currently, around, well, I'll sort of let it speak to itself. I think what you see here is, I think most important information here is the fact that, over the course of a year, we have a roughly 30% open position currently. Now we're going to be over time under the guise of our risk management policy, working to close that open position incrementally. And most of that open position is for 2022 energy. For an IST, just for the purpose of an IST, is an interscheduler trade. That is a financial product that you use to hedge your exposure to energy price risk. REX, that's the renewable premium of renewable energy. Capacity is your resource adequacy. That is the reliability obligation. And then CAISO and PPAs are the renewable projects that we have brought online. We do have 550 megawatts of PPAs that we have signed. Many of those are still in development and won't be coming online until 2022 and 2023. So that's why our PPAs remain such a small portion of our overall cost stack. I did speak to the fact that Brilliant 100 is being discontinued. A number of our communities have already made the decision to transition customers either to Bright Choice or Renewable 100. I believe the city of Hayward, as an example, just a week ago decided to recommend that all customers on Brilliant 100 transition to Renewable 100 once Brilliant 100 closes. So I'm going to jump through to overhead. Next slide, please. Not a lot to report here, not a lot of significant changes in budgets to most of our categories. And I did speak to that. We are decreasing some of our consultant spend to as we're hiring people to do the work internally. So that's sort of the main sort of point to highlight here. Next slide, please, to personnel. For 21-22, we are looking to increase headcount by 6 to reach the 43 FTE full-time staff, full-time equivalent staff. So, that's, a not insignificant growth. I think we're hoping to make many of those hires early in the year. And we currently have one position open and we're going to be posting for a number of other positions soon. Next slide, please. In the marketing expense, one of our biggest expenses is our data manager. That is a cost that we incur to continually enhance our customer service systems. Required mailings are those joint rate mailers you receive. Twice a year you get mail from us, often comparing our product to what PG&E offers, or comparing our products to what the state averages are. So you can imagine, that means we're putting millions of pieces of mail out there each year. So it's just kind of a regulatory expense we are burdened with. Let's go to next slide, budget, legal, policy, regulatory. Yeah.
Nick, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
On those required mailings? Are you're spending less because you're moving electronic?
Yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
That's what I thought. Just checking. Thank you.
Yep. And we're about half electronic and half mail, which has been a nice transition for us. So a lot of paper. Slide 14. We continue to rely on an outside contractor as our general counsel. We continue to do that. We continue to retain a lobbyist. And the majority of our other consultants here are for regulatory and legislative economic consulting. In legal consultants too, you don't just have our general counsel, but we have, we spend a lot of time negotiating energy purchase contracts. And so there's a lot of that is to go to pay for the cost of the negotiation of those energy purchase contracts. All right, next slide, please.
Could you just comment on what the sponsorships and memberships is on that slide?
Yes. So sponsorships and the legal policy and regulatory affairs sponsorships and memberships are mostly for sponsorships. So there are a handful of more like regulatory conferences. So an example being UC Berkeley Energy Institute holds an annual energy conference, and it's an energy economics conference. And so we have typically sponsored the UC Berkeley Energy Economics Conference. And so I think it's been $5,000 or $10,000. So that's what the sponsorships and memberships cover.
Thanks.
Draft budget, other professional services. Here, I think the major thing to highlight is the significant reduction in the use of consultants here. And this is largely, the major driver here is this year. In the past, we have outsourced the management of our renewable energy solicitations. So we held a major solicitation 2 years ago, and we outsourced that. This year we held a solicitation, and we largely managed it in-house. We did have some consultants to do more sort of the technical valuation, but we managed the solicitation ourselves. And so, that saved us several $100,000. So next slide. This is our G&A expense, kind of in line with sort of the theme I've been sharing. The things that changed pretty significantly here were software and subscription costs increased by $800,000. So, as we see consultant spend go down, we see licensing and software go up, which makes sense because we're hiring people, and now they're doing the work, and they're relying on sophisticated tools. This also covers a large Salesforce implementation we've been doing, so that we have more control over our customer data, and that we really are, we own the system of record for all customer transactions. Customer opts up, customer opts down, they participate in a program, all that stuff. We want to be the system of record for that. All right. So now on the next slide, I did speak to our capital expenditure. I can't really comment yet. There was a closed session focused on the purchase of a building last week. The building is at 251 8th Street at 8th and Alice in Oakland's Chinatown, about a block from Lake Merritt and about 5 or 6 blocks from Oakland City Center BART. So we are in active negotiations for the purchase of that building. And we are setting a capital expenditure to more than adequately cover whatever any EBC's cost contribution for the purchase of that building. And to also enhance things, to pay for things like improvements. So one of the purposes of purchasing a building is to have a dedicated community space, to be able to host our community advisory committee meetings. Not to say that we won't do everything we can to continue to support virtual participation, and contingent on the state allowing virtual participation to continue, we would very much want to continue to support virtual participation in these meetings. But we will also have a physical ability to meet. This large community space we want to build out would also be great for community participation, events that we may want to hold, education, etc. So some of the money in our capital expenditure is set aside for some of the improvements we want to make to the building as well. Okay.
I have a quick question for you before you go to the local development funding. I thought I remembered at one point hearing, and I could have really totally not had this right, that you were also, there was going to be some budget put forward towards getting a local call center. Am I imagining that? Is that being pushed out to next year?
No, so that is all covered. We can go back a bit. You just hold on. I'm just trying to see the slide. In our If you can go back to slide 10, Adrian, very quickly. So if you think at data management and customer service, those costs are covered in the cost of data management and customer service.
Okay, so that part of that increase could be because we're going to start doing some of the effort to move it to be within Alameda County.
I wouldn't say that that's the cause of the increase. The cause of the increase is you just have more accounts.
Okay.
Right. So we've added 100,000 accounts. And so 100,000 accounts, just you're going to spend more because you're typically charged on a per account basis.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Ernie had a question and then Cynthia.
So this is not so much a budget question, but it has been directly, the issue has been directly asked by Mary. So from the get-go, originally we had already, the agency had committed to having a local call center eventually. So are we looking at the end of a contract? When is the end of the contract and when are we going to put out an RFP for a local call center and for data management?
So we issued an RFP at the beginning of the year, and we are in the review process.
Okay, thank you.
Cynthia?
Yes, my question is similar to both of yours. Yes, I thought that we had made, I don't want to use the word commitment, but for lack of a better word, I thought we were going to bring in the call center within, about 2 years. So I think this November would be that time frame. So I guess what I'm asking is there a commitment to bringing in the call center into Alameda County?
So I guess I'm going to jump in here and say, Nick, I didn't mean to open this up specifically, but I was trying to figure out where that call center budget item is. And I think what you indicated is it's under the data management / customer service. It's the 8.6 million. And depending upon the outcome of your RFP, we'll have the location or whomever's going to be the call center folks. Is
Correct.
that? Okay.
Correct. But I guess my only comment would be there, certainly in the budget we have set, I would see that is not a sort of limiting factor or not for sort of call center location.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, local development. So I'm going to ask JP, are you here? If not, I will take it. But if you are, why don't you?
Yeah, I'm here.
Kind of walk through local development.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Nick. I think we can go to the next slide. There's a summary slide there on the elements of the local development budget. So a couple things to note here. One is that local development, unlike other funds, is set up as a kind of a carryover account. So as we allocate budget each year, if that budget does remain unspent for that year, then it moves, it carries forward. And so as we're getting programs up and running and have committed funds to activities, contracts, vendors, grants, and other things like that, we have access to those funds on an ongoing basis. In addition, this year we have increased our budget for the programs. It's been about $6.3 million this year. It's a couple $1 million more than that, 8.4 million all in. And we are also making good on bringing some kind of revenue dollars in, and I'll talk about that. We haven't factored for the grants and other program dollars because we haven't actually taken them in yet. So in that yellow column here under grants and credits, it's zero. But over the course of the presentation, we do call out some of the programs and grants that we have been awarded and will be participating in that will bring additional dollars in the form of program revenues for our local program activities. So as we look at the budget areas at a high level, we have our demand response and energy efficiency budgets. We are not asking for new funding for those program areas this year. That's not to say we aren't going to be doing work in those program areas. We have $100,000 remaining from last year that's unspent in the demand response area. So we'll be looking for some demand response opportunities. And then energy efficiency dollars, we have money that we are running our pilots, our pay for performance pilots today, and those have gotten enrollments, and we have some ongoing enrollment in our commercial energy efficiency marketplace that we aren't going to pay until the end of basically a year. So we're going to run those programs for a full year and then pay based on metered savings in our energy efficiency programs. And we have other EE activities this year that I'll talk about later. We have $900,000 in our building electrification budget. In our vehicle electrification budget, that's where a large portion of our dollars are going. Part of that is an ongoing commitment that the board had made last year to fund $16 million worth of publicly available charging infrastructure across the county to support vehicle electrification transition. Again, I'll go into all these as we go through. Collaborative procurement is work to support resilient energy facilities to support our public when the power is increasingly going out during PSPS events. Our community investment work centers around our Connected Communities program, which is around debt forgiveness and reducing disconnections. We also have $100,000 in our sponsorship and event budget. So we do sponsor things like the Building Decarbonization Coalition or Transportation Electrification Partnership. And we also get community-based organizations and other folks coming to us to ask for sponsorship of small local events that are program related. So we put some budget in there. And then we also have specific legal and marketing and account services. That's what MASS is. They're activities that we are focused on for program enrollment and advocacy that we are supporting. So one thing to note is that about $200,000 in legal and marketing and account services, we kind of tagged that on after we had built up the budget. So that's not taking from local development. It's adding to our budget. And then as those contracts are spent down or activities are spent down by those other departments, then we have a clear line of sight to all the activities that we're funding. Next slide, please. So on transportation electrification, this is a major focus. Mary, do you want to take hands as we're going through this? Maybe that might be a good way to do this.
Yeah, Cynthia's hand was still up from before, so I'm going to.
I see Monica's hand up.
Here, but Monica has one.
Yeah, maybe we can go back, Adrian.
Yeah, on the energy efficiency budget, I seem to recall that EBCE was going to seek some of the, I don't know what they call it now, public benefit funds from the CPUC.
Yeah.
What's the status of that, and when will you start planning for those funds?
You betcha. I've got a slide on that. So can we wait for that slide?
All right. Yeah, that's fine. Thank you.
So maybe because you're going to cover a bunch of these, let's wait.
Sure.
Let's wait.
Yeah, I was going to wait for that. I was just, anything that's on the whole budget, I just wanted to be able to address it while we've got the slide up.
Right, because there are slides for each of the individual ones.
Yeah. Any other questions on this slide?
Okay.
Okay. I think we'll go on then. And
Yep.
Monica, your hand's still up. So on transportation electrification, this is an area of significant focus. It's the largest source of particulate and GHG emissions now in the county, and light, medium, and heavy duty vehicles are really contributing to that. Certainly light duty vehicles is the largest number of vehicles. Heavy and medium and heavy duty vehicles are particularly impacting our disadvantaged communities with diesel particulate emissions. And so we have kind of a diverse portfolio activities to try to electrify and push and accelerate that transition to cleaner vehicles across those categories. We're really looking at how we can lead and develop and accelerate publicly available charging infrastructure, and really specifically focused on some areas that the private sector doesn't focus on, which is our renters and low-income communities that haven't yet engaged as much as homeowners and higher income communities in the transition, despite kind of lower operating costs for electric vehicles that that people can enjoy the benefits of. We have quite a bit of goods movement. So on the medium and heavy duty side, around the port and into the Central Valley, there's just a lot of transport in medium and heavy duty that originates and moves through the county and into the Central Valley and beyond. And so that's a particular area of growth. We focused a lot of our activities so far on the light duty side, but that medium and heavy duty is really starting to take off, and we want to be on the leading edge of that. And then many of our cities, through their climate action plans, have quite aggressive transportation electrification goals, and also have municipal fleets. And so we're going to continue to help work with our cities to facilitate their leadership in this space. So that's a few of the areas, and I'll go into more detail as we proceed. Next slide, please. So with electric vehicle deployment, a couple areas. So publicly available charging infrastructure. So this is part of that commitment I had mentioned earlier that the board had made last year to support $16 million over 4 years of publicly available charging infrastructure. So that's an area of continued focus. And then we also have some budget to support low-income customers purchasing EVs through the Air District Clean Cars for All program. So that's a program that provides income qualified grants to customers to purchase vehicles. And then there's also a fuel card that will allow people to get essentially cheaper fuel, cheaper electric fuel, who are income qualified. And so we're gonna work with the Air District to add an EBCE incentive on top of a card that's gonna be available through that existing program. Again, with a focus on clean cars for low-income vehicles. We've seen some good take up of the existing grant that has been in place in Alameda County, and we want to accelerate that. We also have money that's been previously allocated to the California Electric Vehicle Incentive Program. So that is going to launch this September of 21. And we are putting $3 million from last year's budget to that program. And then the California Energy Commission is providing $14.5 million of incentives from the CEC. So all in, that's $17.5 million of incentives that'll go towards publicly available charging. We're quite excited by that. And we've also been working a lot with the CEC to make sure that that program meets our needs around lower income communities and servicing renters. So we made 2 very strong pushes with the CEC that they adopted. One is to require that half of this funding is allocated towards publicly available DC fast chargers that are in close proximity to our multifamily dwelling hotspots. So we built a map, identified where we had high concentrations of multi-unit dwellings, and then identified those as locations where we should be installing publicly available charging. One of the largest constraints or inhibitions to people buying an electric vehicle is lack of access to charging. And people who own their homes have an easier time of charging their vehicles at their homes, but renters, people in multi-unit dwellings, don't have that same access. So we wanted to make sure that this money was really going to be knocking down that barrier. We also worked with the CEC to ensure that affordable housing that is not in a disadvantaged community get the same incentive treatment as affordable housing in disadvantaged communities. So again, we mapped all of our affordable housing multi-unit dwellings and showed the CEC that we had a lot of affordable housing multi-unit dwellings that were not in disadvantaged communities, and that any incentive treatment for affordable housing should be equal across our county. And so the CEC basically gave us both of those for this program, which is the first of its kind. So we're really targeting this money towards those communities. We also have an administration fee on top of the incentives that we're putting into this program, so we have to pay that. And then in preparation for launch of this program, we've provided funding for multifamily operators to give them technical assistance so that they can go pursue these incentives in pursuit of deploying charging infrastructure in and around multifamily dwellings. So a lot of consistency here on how we're trying to target this money. Next slide, please. A second area of focus is our municipal fleets. So we've been working already to assist our cities in completing assessments for transitioning their fleets to electric vehicles. This is the second bullet here on expanding fleet electrification, TA. So we've got multiple cities who've already taken advantage of that technical assistance, and we want to expand that. It's been quite successful. And we have new cities that we're bringing on. We want to make sure there's budget to support them. And so, we are continually collaborating with our city partners. And as they're ready to take this on, it will help us build out a deployment plan for installing charging infrastructure at our city locations where these vehicles are domiciled, and also evaluating how we can procure and accelerate the city's procurement of vehicles so that they can move that forward and get rid of their internal combustion vehicles and transition them to electric. The first bullet here is we currently have a lot of existing charging that our cities are currently operating, and it's not easy. Some of our cities have expressed a desire for us to basically take that charging infrastructure over from them so that we as a central procurement agency can assist in operating and maintaining those chargers, keeping them operating, keeping uptime, which is essentially the number of hours per year that they're operating. And so we're going to be evaluating what do all these chargers look like, where are they located, what types are they, how can we put together a package for our cities to take over operation of those and make sure that they're being utilized for the community efficiently. And then lastly, we are looking at a vehicle to building pilot at one of our critical facilities. So we're putting solar and storage at energy resilient public facilities across the territory, and looking at ways that we can start to use vehicles as backup power in our facilities. So some money for a pilot there. And then last is we have some money from last year and want to basically kind of develop a product, for our cities so that we can provide, vehicles and charging as a service to our cities to help them accelerate that fleet electrification. I see a hand up. You want to take that?
No, I'm going to ask that we wait until you get through all of your things, until you get through the LDVP. I mean, we talked about doing as it goes, but I think that if you can try and hold it and get through everything, JP, and then we can come back. So please do that.
Happy to do that. Next slide, please. So medium and heavy duty is the third category in the transportation electrification front. So there's a few things here that we're focused on. One is technical assistance for goods movement and the fleets that are moving goods throughout the county. So similar to our municipal side, how do we help those fleet operators plan that transition? Part of that is fast charging hubs. So, one is the fleet, which is the first bullet, and the second is the hubs. Where do these vehicles go? What's their routing? And how do we think about charging those vehicles with publicly accessible charging infrastructure? And then the third piece here is a charging offer for those medium and heavy duty vehicle operators. And there's a specific type of heavy duty vehicle called a drayage truck. it moves containers, shorter distances. It's a key area that is transitioning now to electric. There's some electric drayage vehicles that are coming online. And we've been in conversations with some of the drayage operators who are operating fleets about helping them transition those vehicles. Many of those vehicles are operated by independent contractors who don't have the money to buy a new electric drayage vehicle. So thinking about how we can make that offer easier. Many of those people do reside in county, and we want to help those operators transition to vehicles. We do have a couple of grants here, as I mentioned. We haven't put them in the actual budget, but we have already received notification on these 2 grants. One is our medium and heavy duty blueprint, which is a California Energy Commission award that we received to look at a blueprint for how across the county we can transition medium and heavy duty vehicles to electric. And then we also got a $300,000 award from the US EPA that we celebrated a couple weeks ago, which is to look at some of the brownfields, which are toxic or unusable sites from an EPA characterization, so that we can look at them as charging hubs in the county. Next slide, please. So community resilience. So we have our energy resilient public facility program. This has been operating for a couple of years now. I think last board meeting, the board approved money for our independent engineer who's going to go to the sites, the first 40 sites across 4 cities, to evaluate putting solar and storage on those sites. So we had put some money into that. And then because we added 3 new communities, we want to provide some funding to our existing consultant, ARUP, to do the analysis for the facilities that those cities have deemed critical, so that we can add them to the program. And then our ongoing enrollment for Resilient Home, which is our solar and storage program, will continue. And we've had good success in both single family uptake as well as multifamily affordable uptake. So we'll be soon announcing, I think 6 to 8 multifamily affordable housing units that will be putting solar and storage onto those facilities and serving those residents. So quite exciting there. I want to keep pushing that forward. And then we have some funding remaining from last year that we're rolling over. We're launching our medical baseline program for customers with some funding from last year, and we're going to put some more money into that program to increase that offering for customers who are dependent on durable medical devices and have experienced public safety power shutoffs. We want to make batteries available to them. Next slide, please. So on energy efficiency, Monica, to answer your question, we are pursuing an elect to administer filing with the PUC, planning on putting that in the next few months. And that will be to pursue about $3 million a year for energy efficiency that will be funded by the PUC, by state funds that are collected from our customers, but then we would have the ability to allocate those funds to programs that we design and operate. So we'll be filing that in the next quarter and hopefully launching that in the first quarter of 22. And then we do have some rollover, as I mentioned before. We have programs that we're operating now that we're going to pay at the end of the operational year. And so that's money that we're carrying forward from last year's budget, and that's across low income residential and commercial customer segments. Next slide. On building electrification, this is a very new area that is quickly evolving and maturing. And as I believe Alita Dupree mentioned in her opening statements, this is an area of necessary growth from an air quality and equity perspective. So we are going to be putting some money into a low moderate income electrification incentive program. I want to make sure that that our lower income communities are participating in this next transition away from burning gas in their homes. We've also been doing considerable work on induction incentives and public education. So we have our commercial induction incentive is now being released, and we want to do some more work around education similar to the videos that we released with Sunset Magazine, educating folks about induction and continuing to promote that new technology in our community. Lastly, we also have some money for electrification workforce development. It's a small bit of money. We're not a workforce development agency. There's a lot of workforce development funding and partnerships that we are looking at with different workforce development organizations across the community. But we've definitely noticed that in the electrification area, specifically, accessing trained workers to do this work has been a bit of a challenge. So a little bit of money there. And then this is an addition from the last draft budget. We put in $100,000 into an induction lending program. We've started lending induction cooktops through our cities. It's been very successful. The cities that have started to operate that have quickly been oversubscribed. And so this is an increase in that program that would be operated more by a third-party organization to make it more widely accessible across the county. And then on the grant side, we did get a grant to identify opportunities for natural gas decommissioning. This is actually something we're doing with an organization called GridWorks and PG&E as a partner to identify areas that we can start to systematically and strategically decommission the gas grid and electrify those residents and businesses. So we've got some grant money to help with that analysis. Next slide, please. So our Connected Communities program, I'm going to do this one pretty quick because we have more of a presentation on it later. But Connected Communities, we actually started this prior to COVID-19 and have been working on different ways to identify how to reduce disconnections and arrearages for our frontline communities. So we've allocated a little over $1 million to this effort as a whole. One area of that will be pushing hard on enrollment in our arrearage management program, which I'll talk to on the next slide. We really want to, help reduce the uncollectibles budget that we have set aside, and part of that will be identifying ways to leverage state and federal funding for utility debt relief and rent relief, and then also evaluating how EBCE can utilize some of that uncollectibles budget effectively to reduce debt burden for our customers who are simply unable to make those payments. We certainly heard loud and clear from our focus groups that working with community-based organizations was really important in increasing, credibility of programs like arrearage management plan and clearly explaining how those programs operate. And so we've got budget to coordinate and collaborate with CBOs. And then we are also launching our DAC green tariff and community solar green tariff programs. So that'll provide a 20% discount to about 2,000 care customers that live in disadvantaged communities. And we'll be kind of overlapping DAC GT and AMP so that customers who are enrolled in AMP can also access DAC GT, and by reducing their ongoing bills, hope is that they'll have a better chance of staying enrolled in AMP and getting their debt reduced through staying in that arrearage management program. And the DAC GT program is actually supported by the state. And so that will be something that we will actually get about $1.6 million in reimbursement from the state in order to operate that program and provide that discount to our customers. Next slide, please. So our arrearage management plan, the arrears management program. This is a program that allows customers who have over $500 in PG&E debt, some of which needs to be over 90 days in order to be eligible for the program, can be eligible for. So we have about 15,000 customers that are eligible for the arrears management plan, and we've identified kind of two major areas that we want to be focused on. One is maximizing enrollments in the arrears management plan, and then once people are enrolled in the program, we want to keep them in the program, because the longer they stay in the program, the more debt they can get forgiven. And if a customer stays in the program for 12 months, then they can have all of their debt forgiven, assuming they're paying their ongoing bills. And so we have a few areas of focus on enrollment, which is starting our marketing, education, and outreach. So we've started that this week, letting customers know they're eligible, helping them get to the right place to enroll. We're also pretty soon going to start our CBO outreach to help get community-based organizations to help us with that enrollment. And also looking at how we can make the process for enrollment easier. Right now, it's a little clunky. Customers have to call PG&E. They might not want to call PG&E if they feel like they owe them money. So how can we assist customers in enrolling in that program? And then once they've enrolled, we want to help keep them in the program. So we're actually identifying how we can basically create a case manager for customers to help them stay in that program. And this is an area, one of the areas where we're looking at an EBCE bill credit as a mechanism to help a customer stay enrolled in that program. One thing to recognize is that the EBCE portion of the bill, we're less than half of the electricity bill, and then customers also have a gas bill. So even if we give a customer a credit for our portion of the bill, it doesn't necessarily mean they don't still have debt with PG&E. And what we know from PG&E is that a partial payment of a bill still counts as a non-payment for arrears management plan retention. We've raised this with the commission as a challenge, but this is one area where we're trying to identify how, again, we can really help customers stay in this program for the long term. And a bill credit is one tool for that we are evaluating. Next slide, please. So that's it on the local development side. Happy to take questions.
So what I'd like to do is go back, Adrian, if you can go back to the slide, whatever it was that showed the list of them. So to help our members
slide 18
remember what their questions might have been about. And yeah, that'll work. And so I'm going to entertain a few questions from the committee member, and then members of the public, please keep track of any specific questions around local development fund. I'm going to open it up to the public for comment after Nick has had a chance to complete the full discussion about the budget, because this is all about the budget at this point. So I see, Kate, unfortunately, you're an alternate today. So I will, please keep your hand up and at the point that there is a public comment. So I'm going to go to Ernie and then Lisa. The one thing I would like to do, Adrian, is also recognize Lisa Hugh as the actual member from North, because Anna Olivia is not here. So she is the official member today as of, we'll say 6:30. So I'm going to go, Ernie, you took your hand down.
Well, I took it down because it sounded like you were calling me first.
Yeah. Okay. Ernie,
Okay.
Lisa, Monica, Joel, and then Cynthia. So Ernie and then Lisa.
Sure. And also as a key for the hands, I have at least two separate things that I want to comment upon about the budget, but I will comment about the first and then step back and then comment on the second after everyone else has had a chance to speak. So I want to first say, JP, I think I've said this before, I think you do an amazing job on this in general. You're juggling a bunch of really complicated and innovative programs. But the thing I'm going to speak about right now is actually something that I have a problem with. or concerns with, and I brought this up before. You've shown an amazing ability to both coordinate and get a payback on funds for vehicle electrification. It is our number one greenhouse gas emitter in this area, and so it should be part of what we work on. Absolutely. And I've never seen anyone that's been able to maximize funding and get grants like you on this. That said, while this should be, I believe, well, this should be part of our portfolio of what we do, and it should be legitimately part of the LDBP. The amount of money it takes up of our LDBP, I think, is way out of whack with what should be coming out of the LDBP. That's not to be saying that exactly the work you're doing and exactly the money that's being spent shouldn't be spent, but this money should be coming from our cities and the county and from even MTC. You know, if you're capable of doing this amazing work using their monies or a much greater majority percentage of their monies to achieve this, and even using this agency to act as an administrator or coordinator, that's fine. Again, I think this is something that MTC or some other agency could help with. But it's been a repeated concern that, again, the amazing work you're doing on this is digging into our limited LDBP funding for other things, like the actual development of local resources. And so I'm going to stop there, and there's a lot more to say on this. I think we need to have further conversation. Amazing job, but we should not be using this large a chunk of our limited LDBP funds for this. If this work can continue with the cities not pawning off their obligation, and MTC and the county not pawning off their obligation to do the work you're doing, then we need to get the monies from them, plain and simple, for the work you're doing in large part. And I will stop there. Thanks.
Thank you, Ernie. Lisa, then Monica.
Yes, great. I actually have a little, I have several questions. I'm wondering, Mary, do you want me to ask them all at once, or do you want me to do what Ernie is doing and ask them one at a time?
I think that if you can group them into areas, then that would be good. And then I can come back, or you can ask them. It really is up to you.
Okay.
You can go.
Sure. Great. Well, I will just start by saying, thank you so much for this presentation. I really appreciate and want to honor all the work that went into developing this, all the ideas and programs that you're now able to build out as EBCE. It's really exciting. And of course, the LDBP is obviously a very hard fought fixture to really make do on this community rootedness piece for the CCA. I am curious about a few elements. One, in terms of the vehicle to building solar and storage pilot that you mentioned, I'm curious if you have an idea for what that timeline for that pilot might look like and who might administer it. A second question is around the medium and heavy duty TE work. Some advocates have talked about the possibility of low or zero emission zones to spark electric truck fleets at the city level. I'm curious if any cities that EBC is working with have named these as potential possibilities. I'm naming this because that has the possibility to have a really big impact on environmental justice communities. I'm also curious about all the pieces around community resilience. I think that's really exciting. It's a topic that so many of our frontline communities have been waiting for. There's great sensitivity and urgency, especially given the start of wildfire season, extreme heat events on the horizon. It's exacerbated by the fact that we're entering another drought. So any idea of a timeline for that scope of work might also be really helpful. And then the last piece that I'll name is I'm curious around in your building electrification slide, I noticed only 50K for electrification workforce development. It seems like that could be a huge opportunity just given the current conditions and the challenges around employment and underemployment given COVID. So I would just love to hear some thoughts around the justification for that particular dollar amount, especially in comparison to the other items. Thanks.
So I think, JP, there were a couple things here that Lisa had. I've written them down, and I'll kind of bring them back. And if there's anything else you can remember, I think Ernie's was more of a comment. Lisa was asking about timeline on the V2B, vehicle to building, and if you've talked with any cities around a zero emission zone that they would perhaps have the opportunity to do.
Yeah,
And
Yeah, I have all 4 of those items. I'm happy to talk to them. So I don't have timing right now on the V2B solar and storage pilot. It ties in a little bit with our community resilience program. So we are currently sending an independent engineer out to 40 facilities with our first 4 cities. And that's happening now. And then we will be procuring solar and storage assets for as many of those 40 facilities as we possibly can. So that's moving through kind of an active procurement in the short term. And then once we've built those facilities out, then we would look to identify one where we could do a V2B solar and storage pilot on, and some of that will be parallel tracking. So we expect to issue a solicitation for those solar and storage resources in the next 3 to 4 months, assuming we can get our other 2 cities that are participating in this phase completed. So that's kind of the timing for those 2 things. With the low emissions zones, that is not something that I have actively heard talked about so far with our cities, and so I can't really speak to that. That's obviously a zoning issue, which is not under our purview, but certainly think it's an interesting concept, and certainly seen that happen in some international cities. And then on workforce development, we put a small amount of money towards that. Last year we gave $100,000 in workforce development grants to 3 different organizations: Cypress Mandela, Rising Sun, and the Tri-Valley Tri-Valley Career Center out of Las Positas College. And so we've started those relationships up, and this is kind of some targeted work specifically around building electrification. I think there's a lot to do here. We also are continuing to keep our eyes out for other dollars that are coming in that we can leverage for workforce development training. One of the things that we've done is to say, when we sign a contract with a vendor, for example, Rising Sunrun, who's our resilient home partner, we had specific workforce development priorities in there. And now we are working with Rising Sun and those agencies that we've provided grants to basically say, okay, how can we use the money that we've allocated to create workforce development training opportunities that these organizations can do the workforce development, and now we have a vendor who can actually hire those people. So to create a pull to bring them into the workforce. So that's how we're looking at some of these other programs as a pull mechanism, because folks like Cypress Mandela, Rising Sun, Tri-Valley Career Center, like they've got their workforce development training programs. So we just want to make sure that we can hire people who are coming out of those programs.
JP, just on the workforce development, I also just say that we are, there are other workforce development efforts that are sort of above and beyond this. So for instance, in our disadvantaged community green tariff program, when we issue that solicitation, there's going to be an explicit requirement from the state of California for there to be workforce development plans in those solicitations. So I think the thing with workforce, we've tended to take the approach of trying to tie workforce to projects so that, there's this clear sort of connection between the development and the job creation. The challenge in electrification is we're very early in the electrification build cycle. So we're not yet really in a place where there are tremendous numbers of jobs being created because there just isn't the volume of projects.
Thank you. Monica, Joel, and then Cynthia.
Yeah, I have a couple of specific questions and then something just to kind of make sure that I understand this budget properly, and then a general question. So for example, for energy efficiency, you're not budgeting any incremental dollars for this fiscal year, but given your past balance, you've got 574 that are available to spend this year or that you plan to spend this year. And my question goes back to, if you're going to get the public benefit dollars, and I think you said you'd get them Q1 2022, which gives you half of the year, half of the fiscal year. Or if you get those funds, will you be adding staff to implement those programs? Or how exactly will you be spending the dollars? Is it to augment the rebates or funding that you get from the public benefits? And then second question about electric vehicle electrification. If I'm understanding this correctly, and for sure correct me if I'm wrong, your budget will go from an estimated spending this fiscal year of 1.1 million to budgeting $10.4 million for this program. And a little similar to Ernie's comment, it seems like a big chunk of dollars is going to this effort. And I'm not sure, like, I know that we had these pillars or this criteria that we kind of, I don't know if we adopted it, but as part of like when we evaluate programs, how well does it meet those different objectives? I'm just wondering, like, how do you decide to put this much of your budget into one particular program? And then I had a specific question about vehicle electrification, and really interesting to hear about the talk about the port and electrifying some of the vehicles that are used to support the port. If the port is run by its own, I guess, public district, the Port of Oakland, are you working with them to match funds to do some of the electrification, or is this something completely different than the Port of Oakland?
Yeah. Thanks for all those questions, Monica. So on the energy efficiency program, we have funding from last year, and we have launched pilots that we have enrolled customers in and plan to pay those customers based on savings at the end of a year. So we want to wait for a full year to confirm that we have meter-based savings, which is why it's a pay-for-performance program. And so that funding will be spent once we've identified how much has been saved and have they met those thresholds. So we have not budgeted in the in this budget for money that we haven't gotten basically a contract to receive or invoiced for. And so because that elect to administer is still a plan, and we expect to get it, but we haven't put any dollars for it in our budget because we don't know if we're going to get it. The PUC may tell us that we don't have access to those funds. So that's why it doesn't sit here, even though, if all things go quickly, which is difficult to get out of the PUC, we could see those projects starting within this FY. And if we do get those funds, then we would plan to hire some staff to help administer those programs. But again, we haven't budgeted in here. That would be an adjustment over the course of the year once we actually got the funding to do that work. On vehicle electrification, I'm not sure. I may have not been clear about the funds. So the board had allocated $16 million over 4 years to this public charging program, and that was in part to bring in the money from the California Energy Commission. So we allocated $4 million last year, and then we're allocating $4 million again this year, and then we would do that for 4 years in sequence. That's the plan. That's what the board had committed to. And so you had mentioned $10 million, and I'm not exactly sure where that came from. So
it's the FY balance, the carry forward from the
I see. Got it. Yeah. So that's
Monica. What I would say, just an important comment to make around vehicle electrification is across our program areas, it is by far the most capital intensive program that we run. If you think about like energy efficiency tends to be much more of a incentive driven demand response as incentive or energy procurement. So like the funds are coming out of procurement dollars. So whereas electric vehicle charging is CapEx. So, it's a much bigger upfront investment, and those investments return dollars over time. I think we've taken a very purposeful approach, unlike other CCAs that have just allocated incentive dollars, to say, we don't think the private sector is fulfilling kind of the needs of our community from a charging perspective. So we are not going to allocate, dollars to incentivize private sector entities to deploy charging. We are going to actually bring capital to the table, our own capital, to go and do it. It's just a different approach.
So you're going to own your own chargers?
Yes.
All right. And then I think I had just the other question was related to the
port.
Port.
Yep. Yeah. So
Oh,
on
and then the
port-
pillars, and then the pillars question. I think that's what we called it. I don't remember actually.
Yeah, so on the port, we have been in communication with the port. You know, the port is their own LSE, and they serve load on the port. We actually also serve quite a bit of load on the port. And then there are, you know, the transportation that's coming from the port is going off port property. And there's a lot of fueling stations. There's also a lot of areas where vehicles are idling, staying kind of close to the port in order to pick up goods. And you know, so there's opportunity off port property to basically serve load and electrify vehicles that are driving on and off of port property. So that's part of the electrification blueprint that we'll be working on with the funding from the California Energy Commission that I mentioned, but certainly working with the port, who, you know, is a department of the city of Oakland, is a key priority for that work. And I think, you know, to the pillar question, you know, the reality of, you know, transportation being such a high emitter of emissions certainly hits the emissions areas. And as Nick said, you know, this is an area that is capital intensive, that is requiring this amount of capital. And then lastly, you know, what we've seen from studies is that, you know, although electrified vehicles on the light duty side, you know, can have a lower cost of ownership and deliver particulate savings, we are not seeing the type of adoption in our lower income and frontline communities. And that's something that we directly attribute to lack of charging infrastructure and lack of vehicles. But vehicles are not something that we have a large influence on. But publicly available charging is certainly an area that we can influence quite dramatically and focus that infrastructure development in areas that specifically serve those communities so that they can make the transition.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Joel, and then Cynthia, and then Mickey, I see your hands up, but you are also an alternate today. So I'm going to get to both you and Kate in the public process time. So Joel, Cynthia, and Ernie.
Sure. I have several questions. And the first one is, I see the budget increased from about 6.3 million to 8.5 million. And I think the rationale GPU mentioned earlier is due to the service area expansion. If I understand the budget correctly, so the overall operating budget probably increased by maybe about 20 or 25%, but the local development budget increased to a much bigger percentage, maybe over 30%, something like that. So my first question is, what's the justification for that? Well, we are thinking purchasing a $5 million real estate and increasing the headcount from 37 full-time employee to 43 full-time employee. So that's my first question. And my second question is, I'm a little bit lost when you talk about the community investment. Just looking at the chart, the table in front of us, it's an increase from 0 to $1.15 million. And when you present that, I see some numbers, 1.6, 1.1. So a little bit lost. If you can explain that, that will help, especially why it's increased from 0 to over $1 million number. And my third question is, for this table, we have about 100K for sponsorship and events. I think earlier when Nick presented the legal policy related spendings, over there are some numbers, maybe 25K for conference also. So what's the difference between these two? So these are my questions.
Okay. Yeah, great. Thanks for that. So the budget increase is larger than the load from our new communities. So when we looked at the budget, that was one element of the budget increase. And we certainly have some programs that are specific to enrolling new communities in existing programs and making sure that those existing programs are available to those new communities and cities as we bring them on. And then we also actually added money, which speaks to your second point on community investment. The additional dollars that we added was really for our Connected Communities program because COVID and debt relief and customers who potentially face a disconnection once PG&E reduces their or eliminates the moratorium on disconnection is such a pressing issue. So we put some more money into that program, kind of above and beyond the growth rate to the local development program from that new load. And then I would just say the community investment. So we have 1.15 on the community on the Connected Communities slide. I think the 1.6 million you are referring to, that's the money that is specific to our Disadvantaged Communities Green Tariff program. And similar to the other grants that we have gotten, we just filed our advice letter to the PUC for that program today. We certainly expect to get that money, but we don't have it in hand. And so that 1.6 million was specific to the Disadvantaged Communities Green Tariff and Community Solar Green Tariff program. And that's what that program is expected to cost this year. But that's kind of an element of our Connected Communities program, but it doesn't sit in this 1.15 million.
So that's a conditional expense. If we got the funding, we will do it. Otherwise, that's still just budgeted 1.15 million.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah, and my third question was for the sponsorship. I forgot to ask one more question, which is I know the vehicle electrification, the number looks big, but I'm curious when we translate it to charging facility or charging stations, how that 5.5 million translated to how many chargers?
Right. So on sponsorships, each program or each department has some money in a sponsorship budget. So we have some marketing related sponsorships. We have some legal and policy related sponsorships. And this 100,000 is for programs related sponsorship. So instead of creating one large sponsorship budget that each department goes after to try to fund their thing, we each put a little bit of money in our own budgets. And then, when we choose to, or when we get requested to support an event, then we identify to which department that event kind of is valuable to. So that's why there are some different sponsorship budgets. On the vehicle electrification side, we expect that each publicly available DC fast charger installation is between $80,000 and $100,000 per charger. And so some of this money that we are putting into an incentive program will be kind of leveraged up by the private capital that will come in to build those chargers and get those incentives. And then, to the extent that we are going to own and operate chargers, we are also evaluating how much of that money goes in as equity and, evaluating bringing debt or other sources of financing in so that we can deploy, sufficient chargers to meet the need in the territory.
Okay, thank you.
So I've had a request that I'm going to honor. We have one of the CAC members who has to drop off in a few minutes for a different call. And so she wanted to make a comment about this, and then she's going to drop off. And then I'm going to go to Cynthia. And Ernie, I'm going to come back to you after we get to other folks. So Cynthia, Jane, Shiva, and then Ernie. So Lisa, go ahead and do the comment that you wanted to make.
Great. Thank you, everybody. And again, thank you, everybody, for hanging in there. I know this is a grind. So I do unfortunately have to go, but I wanted to just offer some comments before I leave. First, I just want to honor and name that I understand that there's significant disappointment and frustration at the size and proportion of the vehicle electrification budget in comparison to the other line items. My understanding is that specifically out of a concern that Cal EVIP is significantly less likely to reach low income and frontline renters in particular. So I want to note that because I definitely heard that from folks. I'm glad that we're thinking about medium and heavy duty vehicles and renters and low income folks, at least as mentioned. Back to Cal EVIP, I see an opportunity to set a more aggressive target than the CEC's 25% allocation for incentives for DACs and low income folks. And I also see an opportunity to be very targeted and strategic in delivering those investments to actually make sure that the benefits can reach environmental justice communities. Another piece I wanted to mention is I see an opportunity to go bigger on some workforce development, bill relief programs, local community grants, and community investments. I'm really excited by some of the opportunities that are named, but I'm concerned that the timelines proposed, especially around community resilience, I'm concerned that they might not move fast enough to protect those most vulnerable when we've seen that one of the value adds of a CCA is actually the ability to mobilize funds faster to meet community needs, as we've seen with Sonoma Clean Power in reaction to some of the wildfires, for instance. So I'm thinking that resourcing existing anchor institutions as COVID safe spaces during extreme heat events, for instance, that's something that is very much on our radar. And I think we've heard echoed from some of our community members. Thanks.
Thank you, Lisa.
Yeah, Mary, if I can. So I totally agree that we can push the CEC harder and would note that's actually what we did. So, you know, the CEC was providing 25% more allocation to EV chargers in DACs and MUDs. And we actually said, no, we should require that fully half of the funding goes to those areas. And so it took us a year in working with the CEC to get them to do that. And we actually asked for more. And unfortunately, the CEC didn't agree with that. So we pushed them harder. It's a first of its kind, and agree completely with you that, you know, we want to see as much of this go to those areas as possible. But we did make some headway on that, and you know, even though we didn't get everything we asked for, we were you know, happy with what we got. Well, not happy with what we got, but we were glad that they met our request at least partway.
Thanks, JP. Cynthia, Jane. Then Jane.
Yes, thank you. Overall, a very good budget, a local development budget. I do have a concern also about the amount going to vehicle electrification. However, I think it's wise to leverage any state dollars that we can possibly get, and we are getting a lot of state dollars, almost a 1-to-4 ratio. My concern is I'm an advocate for also the local call center. Now, that is not part of this budget at all. I mean, part of your budget is that correct? I mean, part of the segment of the budget that you're presenting. Is that correct?
It's not, Cynthia. It's in the call. Yeah, it's in a different part of the budget.
Okay. Okay. So I want to make sure that we have enough money set aside for that. Also, should we go to a local call a local call center, which hopefully would bring some Alameda County residents into the call center and provide dollars into the local community. I know the call center would not be a large call center, but still, I think to the extent that we can in-house our workforce into Alameda County, you know, from a labor perspective, that would be preferable, not only a labor perspective, but keeping the dollars within the county. So maybe at the end of the presentation, we can go back to that section again. Thank you.
Okay, Jane, Shiva, and then Ernie.
Thanks, Mary. I just had a couple of questions, and again, thanks JP and staff for this great presentation and all the thought that's gone into this. It's it's just super exciting. On the medium and heavy duty, so what the numbers you're putting out there, I just thought they seemed pretty low, in comparison to the actual costs in that area, and also the opportunity for moving the needle on emissions and particulates, particularly as they affect frontline communities there. So I wondered if you could just talk a little bit of, are those exploratory funds, or are they implementation funds? Are they, what are they incentive funds? And if they're incentives, like what do you see as the leverage rate? Like, what's this actually going to get us? Particularly like the 250,000 for drayage seems like, I don't know, maybe you'll get like 1 or 2 rigs for that, right? And then have no money to actually manage them. So what's kind of what's behind those numbers? They seem awfully low. And then on building electrification, seems like there's plenty of things in there to address adoption and kind of overcome barriers to implementation. How much are you guys thinking forward to long-term costs of operation? Given that by implementing all electric, heating and cooking, people are likely to see bills increase as well, since electricity is more expensive than gas.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. So on the medium and heavy duty, this is kind of early exploratory. So this sector is kind of just getting going. It's a few years behind the light duty on the vehicle side. So what we are focusing on is this kind of transportation electrification technical assistance on medium and heavy duty. So evaluating some key fleets that we can work with in an analytic fashion to help them build a plan out. How do they electrify those fleets? Where do they charge those vehicles? Where do they domicile those vehicles? And then, we'll be looking at, okay, what's the charging deployment plan and what's the vehicle procurement plan? And I think that's, that would be something that we would look to follow on funding to then evaluate how we can accelerate that deployment. I think when we're thinking about the large capital outlays, for both charging infrastructure and vehicles, there are ways that we can kind of bring in external capital to help with that is available in the market. So certainly not planning on buying a bunch of vehicles and deploying a lot of infrastructure with the funds that we've currently identified for this fiscal year. On the building electrification question, I think the heat pump hot water heater incentive program that we are currently operating in partnership with Bayren is one area that we've made an investment in, and I think the cost element is something that we are certainly evaluating with electrification. One particular sector that we are looking at, which is particularly relevant to the low moderate income electrification incentive that we want to put in, is there's a lot of lower income renters who still have like electric resistance heating. So that's incredibly expensive, or they have inefficient air conditioners. And so we're going to be targeting that approach to folks who are currently paying more because they're using a lot of electricity and not very efficiently, for opportunity to get those folks onto newer technology that can reduce their bill and make for a cleaner operating home. So that building electrification space is still pretty kind of tactical these days to figure out who can benefit, and that's where we're focusing our activities.
Thank you. Shiva, and then Ernie.
Thanks, Mary. I learned a lot. Excellent presentation. Thanks, JP. Thanks, Nick. and a good portfolio of programs. I just had one clarifying question. The local development funds you've been talking about is related to customer programs. Do we have another local development budget for procurement, which is separate from this?
It's not a local development budget, it's a procurement budget. So the procurement department is its own department and has their own budget. That's on the energy procurement side.
But is there a specific percentage reserved to procure or have long-term contracts with local resources?
So Shiva, we don't look at it specifically for local resources, or we don't differentiate between local and non-local resources in our budgeting. What we've done is we have created a set aside, or there's some funds in our local development budget that we have in the past set aside for the above, or the local premium, if you will. You know, if a local project costs $1 million more a year than a non-local project, then that would be funded through the local development budget. For this current fiscal year, the local projects that we have, local wholesale resources, if you will, that we have, are not in the budget because they're not coming in at a premium above what we would otherwise be paying. So, you know, we have a wind energy project that we've built and will be, coming online, in the near term in Livermore. There's no capital set aside because our modeling suggests that project does not carry with it a premium relative to wind that we would buy somewhere else in California. So we're not burdening the local development budget with that.
Okay.
Now, in the future, if that were to be the case, that would be something that would have an ongoing burden on the local development budget.
Okay. So all the procurements up to date have not had a local premium related to local projects.
Correct.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay, Ernie, finally we get back to you for your last question. And then Nick, I'm going to ask you to finish up the presentation about the budget, and then we'll open up questions to the public. Ernie?
Okay, thanks. So I'm just going to touch upon very quickly my first comment, or the gist of my first comment is JP, you've shown an amazing ability to, with your own skills and the toolkit that this agency provides, to make an amazing amount of action happen with a limited amount of money on electrical vehicle electrification. But again, when we created, and we fought for years to create this local development business plan, to get this into the JPA, the core of its idea was for local resources and also energy efficiency. So it'd be wonderful moving forward. I guess we'll need to talk to the board to figure out, it looks like we're on cruise control for the next 2 years or so for a large chunk of the LDBP to go towards these matching funds for electrical vehicle electrification. But it's just too big of a chunk of the LDBP, is my personal opinion, and we could talk more about that. So what you just laid out today, I haven't seen the budget and your programs for a while. There's a lot there. I could ask you questions for hours. It's a lot of amazing stuff, but I will just skip to that. And I feel funny saying this as someone who trumped to Nevada repeatedly to canvass for Bernie. I was actually inspired by Biden's 40% environmental justice equity commitment. And that is the kind of commitment that I would like to see in the LDBP moving forward, that we start allocating larger percentages of the LDBP budget towards local equity. And that's my final comment for this. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Ernie. It's a comment, JP, unless you have something that you want to mention. If not, I'm gonna ask Nick to finish up.
Why don't I finish up here?
Okay. So Adrian, if you can start sharing again, I think we're on slide 29, 28, 29. Thank you.
So I can speak to our reserve, but we're sort of running out of time here, so I'm not going to really spend much time on our reserve. I think at some point in time in the future, we might benefit from just walking through our reserve policy. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, other than to say, our current fiscal year suggests that we will have some fairly small ability to contribute to our reserves incrementally. I am going to kind of leave it at that, unless, of course, Mary, you'd like me to kind of go through the slides. There's some other slides. The other slides there's some risk discussion. Would you like me to cover the risk discussion, comparison with other CCAs? Or should we just move to public? We do have public comment still.
Yeah, I think the one thing that is interesting is slide 31, which does compare us with other.
Yeah, why don't we show that?
I will say that there's no dollar amount on here. These are all percentages. So my understanding is our actual pie is bigger than other people's pie.
Yes, that's right. So, that's, we can't do a dollar for dollar comparison because our size is bigger than most. But, I think what we see here is, this is probably reflective of the fact that we have some economies of scale relative to other CCAs. And so, I think that's particularly reflective in things like staffing costs. We're able to do more with, relatively lower staffing costs. So it's a pretty sort of high fixed cost. Yeah.
So the other thing I would say is like the program's percent is smaller for us, but my assumption is, it's 1.7 versus 2.4. But my assumption is that our actual dollars, which gets you more.
Yeah, I think that's also right. So I think if you think about there are quite a few smaller CCAs. We're the largest CCA in Northern California, for instance. So, it's by quite a significant margin. There's two other CCAs that are sort of relatively close to us, MCE and 3CE. But for the rest, we're quite a bit larger, 2 or more times larger than the rest of the CCAs in Northern California. So, in the same way that like staffing costs are not totally linear, your program costs aren't linear too.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. I think I just wanted to point out for folks that hadn't heard it, we're pretty similar to other folks. It's not like anything's totally out of whack with this budget compared to others. So I'm going to open up to the public. Any question about any portion of this budget that's been presented? It could be specific to LDBP or otherwise. I see one hand going up. Audrey?
Yes, we have 6 people on our speaker list. Alita Dupree, Kate Duggan, Mickey Souza, Audrey Ichinose, and Jessica Tovar.
Okay, so because you have the list, let's go in the order that you just presented, please.
Yes. I'm going to recognize Alita Dupree for 3 minutes. Alita Dupree, if you are, I see that you put your hand down, but you
hey, Adrian, given the time of this and the fact that we actually have another item to discuss, unless people are going to want to push that off, can we move this to 2 minutes?
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm recognizing Alita Dupree now.
Thank you, Chair Mary Sutter. Alita Dupree for the record, she and her. There's a lot here. I'm basically in alignment. Thank you for the robust discussion about local development. And I support EBCE handling as much of the local development themselves. One of the best ways that you can get things done is to do it yourself. So I think we should get out there and start building things. The electrification, buildings, heat pumps, cooking equipment, vehicles, especially heavy vehicles. There's a lot of work going on with trucking. Tesla's coming out with a semi, and there's a freight liner. I think it's called the eCascadia, which I think may already be in production. So definitely that'll help around the port. I've been to some ports around the country, and I know what it's like. So we want to get moving on that. And heat is obviously a concern. We're going to start seeing it. So in seeing the pie charts, I want us to try to budget as much as we can toward procurement. I am concerned about open positions. I would support over budgeting a bit and closing our positions so we don't get hit hard in the really severe weather. Could it cost us more? It might, but at least we'll know what we're paying. So I think this is worthy of passage so we can get to work this summer. Thank you.
Yes, I'm going to recognize Kate Duggan for 2 minutes. You're still muted.
Okay, I'm all set now. So, hi, I just wanted to mention, I thought the fact that you were trying to build charging hubs, I think that's pretty compelling, and it made a lot of sense after trying to figure out what the expense is going towards. I do think that it's not just the lack of charging stations out there, but I think the private sector and how fragmented it is, and how you could find a charging station, but you don't have access to it because you belong to other networks. Whether you're an employee driving, a company vehicle or a resident, I do think that's very compelling, and I'm very interested to hear more about that, because I think that the fragmenting of, access to the charging hubs is a huge problem, and a big reason why there's, the lack of access. And I just had another comment about, I can't remember the name of the program exactly, but how you're going to help residents cover their bills. I'm on a housing commission in the city of Pleasanton, and I just wanted to mention that, you mentioned maybe servicing people yourself, which is understandable, but there's also, CityServe and a huge network of agencies through the county and through all the cities when people can't make a mortgage payment or they're missing rent and they get rental assistance. My comment just to piggyback on those housing services, since when people worry about the roof over their heads, it's a natural fit with also trying to pay their utility bills. You maybe already have that in your plans, but I just wanted to mention that since I think it's a natural fit. So thank you.
Thank you. Vaughn had his hand raised, but he's taken it down. Vaughn, would you still like to speak for 2 minutes?
So Adrian, didn't you also have Mickey?
Yes, but Mickey has dropped.
Okay.
I don't see Mickey in our queue. Vaughn, you are recognized for 2 minutes.
Okay, I didn't want to jump in because it's really not much on the budget, but my one question is, have you guys any inkling of considering what hydrogen's how you're gonna fit a hydrogen thing in? That's more than about 5 years off. Last week, there was the annual merit review for the Department of Energy on hydrogen. It's probably gonna be a much bigger thing, especially for medium and heavy duty vehicles. I know for railroads and stuff like that, the state and the feds are looking at hydrogen hybrid vehicles. That would seem to be where the technology is going in that regard. So also some of the islands they have, like over the local Safeway for your charging, I don't see anybody ever using it since they put it in, either when I drive by every day or whatever. More charging stations isn't going to buy you something if the people can't afford to buy the cars, and that mostly has to do with financing. The only other issue is there are hydrogen fueling stations in Alameda County, Emeryville, Oakland, Hayward, San Ramon, Fremont type of thing. And the biggest problem with them now is that they can't provide enough hydrogen. There's so many people trying to fill up on them. There's nothing there at most times, and it forms lines. There's a gasification process for garbage that they can turn into hydrogen, and it's being used in Fort Liggett down in Monterey, and it's being investigated for fueling train stations and stuff like that. In the AMR last week, one thing they did bring up is something called Rescue H2 Rescue. One of the testing vehicles is essentially as a big fuel cell, and it drives into a community that's been devastated and that people can plug in. One of the 2 test stations in the United States is going to be in Tracy. There should be somebody in our area that knows something about it. Might be something you want to consider. Probably nothing to do with this budget, though. Thank you.
Thank you, Vaughn. We recognize Audrey Ichinose for 2 minutes.
Thank you. The local development programs is truly amazing. But I would like to harken back to last month's presentation by Shana Hursfield Gold, and it was an update on Oakland, the Oakland Climate Action Plan, and all the work that went into developing social metrics to evaluate programs for their social equity and local emphasis. I wonder if the CAC and Mary and Jane, but not necessarily just you, could develop now some sort of provisional assessment of how this local development budget stacks up, measures up. I know it's very hard. It would be a very hard thing to do, but I think it would be a timely thing to try so that we have at least the first benchmark going forward. How well does this local development business plan budget satisfy the criteria of social equity, local development, and so forth? I think that in view of what the pandemic and what the death of George Floyd and so many others have shown us about systemic inequities, we should try to do something to move us forward in a very accountable way. So thank you, CAC members and Mary and Jane for maybe undertaking something like this. Thanks.
Jessica Tovar is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you. Jessica Tovar, coordinator of the East Bay Clean Power Alliance. I work with the local Clean Energy Alliance. And I wanted to say that one of the things that our members have been asking for is for the community innovation grants. I know that is no longer in the budget this year, and it wasn't last year because of COVID, and that money was used for COVID relief. And I think that was fine. And I know that we've had this conversation, specifically with JP, and we acknowledge that, that money is now being used to address the debt relief. And we appreciate you hearing us on the urgency of that. But I really would like to see next year moving forward that we have both, that we offer community innovation grants because our community organizations need that seed money to begin building the different projects. And a lot of organizations have really been paying attention to the opportunity to apply specifically for the Resilience Hub efforts that they are working on at a grassroots level. And then, other issues I want to say, the critical facilities, there are some specific sites that could potentially be great energy resilience hubs that we should be working with the local development business team to make sure that our communities get that benefit and that resilience in the time of crisis that obviously we're in. Last but not least, just to highlight also that Biden's commitment to the 40% equity in the infrastructure plan is certainly sets a great precedent that I would like to see within East Bay Community Energy, investing that much of the budget towards equity and communities that have been historically harmed by the dirty energy economy or completely shut out of the clean energy economy. Thank you.
All right, so thank you, public. I see no more hands up. Adrian, am I missing anybody?
There are no further public comment.
Okay, so back to the CAC. This is noted as an action item for us. I will be attending Wednesday's meeting, and I would like to bring forward something from the CAC indicating support or non-support of this budget, or specifics around preferences that we have. Monica.
Yeah, I generally support the budget. Thank you very much for a well thought out presentation. I did have a clarification question, or something that was brought up by one of the public speakers about the contingency or the risks, since 30% of your supply costs are not hedged at this point. And so in the event that the costs or the market prices were to increase and you had to procure that at a higher rate than what you're expecting in the budget, how do you reconcile that? Would you be coming back to the board to request more money, or do you have contingency already built into your budget? I think you're on mute, Nick.
So, I would say, one, we have contingency built into our budget. When we think about this budget, we're really not asking for approval, on the exact supply and revenue, because we can't control the exact supply costs. Can't fix our supply costs for the year, and we can't guarantee our revenue. Those are, highly variable depending on things like weather. So, in a lot of ways, those are more indicative values. Really, the budget that is within our control are salaries, programs, and the like. We have considerable reserves, and so if we found ourselves in a position where, say, we're significantly not able to recoup our costs from our revenues over the course of an extended period of time, we have cash on hand to cover those costs. That would also likely, be an event where we would come back and inform the board and the CAC that, we have experienced significantly higher costs. Typically we do a board budget update every 6 months. So, in 6 months is when we would come and give a review. If circumstances had changed significantly, we would update our budget to reflect that fact.
All right. Well, I move approval if nobody else wants to do that.
Do I have a second?
Second, Mary.
All right. So Adrian, Member Padilla, motion for approval. Member Vice Chair Frank seconded.
Great.
Do we have any further discussion? Seeing no hands. Adrian, can you please do a roll call vote?
Absolutely. Member Landry. Member Landry?
He was moved over to attendees.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Hugh. Member Hugh. Member Liu.
Yes.
Member Padilla.
Yes.
Member Swaminathan.
Yes.
Member Talria. Member Pacheco.
Abstain.
Member Mutzenberg.
Yes.
Vice Chair Frank.
Yes.
Chair Center.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. All right, I have a question for the group. We have one more item other than our regular, see what we want to put on next time, which is the possible EBCE bill relief program. This is one that we brought forward based upon our question. We wanted to talk about this. I will say that given the slide deck length and my assumption of our discussion, we could be here for another hour. Now that's neither here nor there. We don't have a 2-hour specific timeline that we have to keep, but I wanted to kind of get the thoughts of other CAC members to see if we want to push this off to next month for discussion. This was, JP is more than ready to talk to us about what's happening with this. There is no current bill relief program in place, but there's a lot of other components that are being considered. So I guess what I'd like to hear is from folks of whether they would prefer to talk about this tonight or push it off till next month.
So it sounds to me it's not as time sensitive for AgCom. So if that's the case, I prefer to postpone it to later meeting.
Okay.
And question, Mary, or for JP or Nick, when would this become an actionable item by the board?
So go ahead, JP.
Yeah, so we've presented this to the executive committee a couple months ago, and so this is I wanted to provide the CAC with everything that we had provided to the XCOM around these activities. So this is not an action item to the board at this point in time. It's more an explanation of how we are pulling together a portfolio of activities to help our frontline customers and customers who are facing arrearage and potential disconnection once PG&E lifts their moratorium. And we go into detail of other programs that we look to utilize, and then what the opportunities are for providing bill relief should that be of assistance to customers. So I'm happy to trim this down and provide more of a specific discussion on bill relief at a follow-on meeting, but I wanted to provide you all with what we had provided to the executive committee so you could have those materials.
So Ernie, hearing that, do you have a thought to push this to next month or hear about it tonight? Ernie, it looks like you're frozen on there, so I guess he'll come back. All right, William.
Yeah, just to kind of follow up on Ernie's question.
I'm sorry, my internet just dropped down.
The floor is yours.
Okay,
Ernie. It's an important item.
So you want to talk about it tonight? That's fine. Is that what I'm hearing? Okay.
Well, yeah, so my internet's breaking up. I'm sorry. I will go with the group there. I don't know if you can hear me.
William, go ahead.
Yeah, so my question is kind of similar to Ernie's in terms of like the timing, but in terms of procedure, is it possible does it need to be informational before it becomes an action item, or could it be brought up as an action item if we were to push it off to the next meeting?
Yeah, it can be an action item next week. It doesn't have to be informational then action.
Well, so
there's no program to have.
I think that's the clarification.
Information for us, but we can have an action item to present to the board.
Oh yeah. Just the clarification I wanted to send is like this program. This is not a program we are intending to bring to the board in July for board approval. We have the Connected Communities program, which is being funded to the tune of over $1 million in this budget year. The Connected Community program includes arrearage outreach for the arrearage management program, partnering with a whole variety of other programs that are providing community debt relief, as member Dugan referred to, right? There's actually very significant amounts of funds that are coming from the federal and state government to support utility debt relief. So Connected Communities is like how we're doing and connecting all these various programs and trying to sort of create a funnel for our customers. And in that sense, it's not a program that we're going to our board to say, we want to pursue this program. It's really just the due course of our job to do that work. And what we presented to the exec com and what we're presenting here is just.
So given the fact that 2 out of the 3 people that has mentioned something, at least to start with, wanted to know if we need to talk about it here, and Nick has already talked about it, JP, let's move forward. We'll keep it on tonight's agenda. JP, please reduce the amount of time you're going to be talking about some of these, because that's a long slide deck. And this is informational for us, but at least what we will have is the same information that has been put in front of the XCOM. So JP, please move forward with that.
Okay. So
yeah, I would say just my recommendation is we hit slides 8, 9, 10 and 11.
Okay.
That would be my, just to keep it really snappy.
Yeah, I think the request was around, utility debt relief, and that is one of the tools that we are evaluating in the rubric of the Connected Communities program. So I think I can focus a little bit of time speaking specifically to that.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and do it. And CAC members, apologize for the late time. The budget is always a big item for our discussion. Hopefully we will mean if we're going over tonight, we won't go over next month. So JP.
Great. Thanks. So I think I will take Nick's recommendation. I think that is that's a good one. But so along with our Connected Communities work, which is, as Nick mentioned, we have our arrearage management program. We also have our disadvantaged communities green tariff, and we have allocated $10 million from last year's budget into an uncollectibles budget. So one of the things that we've been doing throughout the course of our Connected Communities work, which I mentioned started prior to COVID, was understanding how customers are not paying bills. So we've been doing a significant amount of data analysis to see which customers are actually moving from 30 days of debt to 60 days of debt, 60 days of debt to 90 days of debt, and trying to analyze how customers are getting into deeper and deeper debt. We've also done focus groups and talking with customers who have faced arrearages and disconnections to understand what's happening with them and think about how programs can support those customers who are facing ongoing debt and challenges paying their bills. And so those focus groups are actually, the outcomes of those focus groups are something we're looking at kind of across our programmatic portfolio. We are also looking at how we can bring in additional programs and funding. So to the point that has been raised, there are other programs that we can utilize. So arrearage management program is one program to forgive utility debt. And there are also other local, state, and federal programs that are available to not only help our customers pay their utility bills, but also help them pay other bills. So rent, food. One of the things that we identified in our focus groups is a lot of our customers who have trouble paying their bills are really balancing a variety of bills. And some bills they're not paying for 30, 60, 90 days until they potentially get a threat of shut off of service. And then they're paying down that bill and balancing that out. So just paying and helping a customer pay their utility bill is while certainly helpful, doesn't address the total problem of their total monthly debt. And so this is something that is currently occurring now, where our team is actively reaching out to other county programs and state, that are allocating and utilizing state funding to help with debt management and working on how we can make that money and those programs more easily accessible to our customers. It's one of the things that we are looking to test with our arrearage management program concierge, this person who will basically be talking to customers within arrearage management program to help them stay in the program. We want to look at how those call center agents, it'd be in our call center, can help customers access these other programs to help pay other bills. And then lastly, as I mentioned, basically monitoring customers' participation in our programs and And then if customers are potentially still unable to pay their bills and unable to stay in a program like AMP, then we would evaluate debt forgiveness as a mechanism to, forgive some debt, reduce some customer stress, and or keep them enrolled in a program like arrearage management program that helps them to reduce their debt. So like this funnel kind of explains how we are evaluating utilizing debt forgiveness from that uncollectibles budget that we have established as a mechanism for achieving these other parts of these goals, including helping customers pay all their bills. Next slide, please. So arrearage management plan is something that we have talked about. This is a mechanism to reduce debt. It is sponsored and supported by state dollars and allows customers with over $500 in PG&E debt that is older than 90 days. Not all the debt needs to be older than 90 days, but they need to have some debt older than 90 days. They can enroll in a program, and assuming they pay their next bill, each bill they pay over the course of a year reduces their outstanding debt by 1/12. So if they enroll in this program and then stay in this program and pay their ongoing bills in whole, then they could reduce all of their outstanding debt with PG&E. So right now there's about 14,000 customers. We've initiated outreach to those customers. And is one of the areas where we're going to be focusing a lot of effort, not only internally within within EBCE, but building a community-based outreach program around this so that we can partner with community-based organizations. As Jessica said, that's where we're going to be allocating some grant dollars to those CBOs so that they can go into the communities that they serve and help customers understand the value of this program. And then we will be building out a retention program for the customers who do enroll in this program so that we can really try to reduce that debt. Next slide, please. We've also been focusing a lot on care and fair enrollment. So this is a 20% discount to the full amount of the PG&E bill. And it's income verified. It hasn't been income verified recently, but that's the guidelines of the program. And customers need to be enrolled in care and fair in order to be eligible for AMP. So again, in trying to get AMP enrollments up and that debt forgiveness going through the AMP program, the care fair enrollment is a key element to that. So we've had an increase in care enrollment with COVID. More people have become income qualified and need that discount. And that's an area that we are also focused on increasing enrollments for. So let's see, I think those are kind of the main slides. There are some additional slides on other programs, but in light of trying to keep this tight, I think those are kind of the main areas.
Yeah, that was I thank you for that, JP. And I know that those are the ones that we're working on now. I know in the past, and one of the main, I think, drivers for this was some of the ones that is on the relief for energy assistance through community help through REACH, which are these one-time credits or one-time grants. And I remember seeing something about this in your focus groups, but I don't know how you guys have been thinking about this.
Yeah, so we've already initiated outreach to some of the organizations, like county and city organizations, where these funds have gone through. And again, that's as we think about kind of the concierge approach to helping customers not only stay in AMP, but also basically building a mechanism so that our team can help customers access these other programs.
Okay.
Because there's a lot of friction in that process. So how can we reduce that friction?
Okay. Thank you, especially for reducing it and trying to keep our time to a minimum. I will open this up to the public for any comments. And Adrian, I see Kate's hand, so she's considered public at this point, if you have any other folks as well.
Great. I only have Kate Duggan. I can recognize for 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Thanks. I just had a, just on the slide that was just on, I was just curious about the federal guidelines, using that for eligibility as opposed to local county or HUD guidelines, or just something that's more local as opposed to the federal poverty guidelines that seem fairly large, and 250% below. It seems, you know, doesn't really get to the local community enough. That could be very different in California than other areas. So I guess I was just curious about using federal as a guideline there, as opposed to local, you know, county guidelines, or, you know, ranges that way.
Yeah, those tend to be set by other folks. So when we identify kind of our priority communities that at a local programs level we go after, we can set our own thresholds. But for something like Care Fera, which is a state program, that's set by the PUC. We've had conversations about, you know, the fact that the cost of living is very different in different parts of the state. But that's not something that we have a direct control over.
So the state uses federal guidelines, not state. So, okay. Interesting. Thank you.
All right, I see no other public comments. Cynthia, your hand is up, and I don't know if it's left over from previously or if you have a comment for now.
No, it's not left over from the previous.
Okay.
Thank you. I'm the one that actually asked this item to be brought forward. So a couple of comments. First of all, I would, when this gets finalized more, you know, and what I want to say, when it's an action item to the JPA, I would like for it to come back to the Community Advisory Council again, has an item. I have a couple of concerns. One is regarding if someone misses 2 payments, and I know it's 2 consecutive payments out of 12 months. The 2 consecutive payments bothers me. I do agree that that people should be trying, to pay their bills as best as they can. But as we all know, especially for the low income and communities of color and other disadvantaged communities, they have been hit probably the hardest. So I don't know if you've thought whether there could be some type of subsidy or some type of forgiveness or something, maybe with that concierge company that you're using, that could assist the customer before they fall out of this AMP program. I'd like to see some type of help provided to the customer. I don't know if you can allocate a possible sum of money for that. I don't know what the cost would be, but I would hate to see somebody not complete the 12-month program. So that's one of my comments. The other thing, as Mary pointed out, yes, other CCAs have provided some grants to their customers, not only the Care and Fera customers, but all their customers. I think Clean Power San Francisco provided a $50 credit, and Marin Clean Energy and Peninsula Clean Energy provided a across the board $100 credit because while certain communities have been hit harder in general, COVID has affected all of us in all income levels. So I don't know if there's been any thought in having and also in across the board credit. I know that doesn't solve someone's overall credit issue. I do agree with that, but not having access, to hot water, taking a shower, can make it difficult for somebody to go to work, or not having the lights on. So I just I don't know if any consideration has been done for that also. And yeah, I think those are my comments.
Okay. Thank you, Cynthia. I'm going to reiterate what I heard earlier, and then I'm going to ask JP to adjust what I'm saying if I heard wrong. At this point, there is no plan to bring forward a specific debt relief program with that name. There are a lot of things in play to help with debt relief. But as is the case always, if there is a program that's going to be considered and it's going to be going from the board, it's coming to us. So I think that if there's something going to happen, we will hear it. But my point is I didn't hear it in the works at this point.
So
JP, correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, this is our Connected Communities program. So our Connected Communities program, which is in this budget and will be hopefully approved by the board, has $1.15 million in it for connected communities. And that is about reducing the threat of disconnection, reducing arrearage for our frontline communities. Part of that is in the retention program. So Cynthia, as you mentioned, if somebody misses 2 payments and they get kicked out of the program, that is a challenge. We've identified that with the PUC, but we don't control that. The PUC has set the boundaries for this program. And if we want to access state money to help customers reduce their debt, then we play by those rules. So those are the rules, and the concierge program that I had identified, one option for that concierge program is to provide some debt relief. And to help them reduce their bill. Now, if we reduce the EBCE portion of the bill, that is only part of the bill.
Correct.
So there's still a PG&E bill. So we can reduce our part, but so understanding how we can use these dollars effectively to most help the people who are most in need is what we are evaluating. Now, providing some amount of money to everybody, some people don't need anything, and some people need thousands of dollars. So providing a small bill credit to everybody, is not targeted and is not providing a sufficient amount for some people and is providing too much to others. So that's why we're being very data driven and focused in how we move this Connected Communities program forward, because we want to make sure that, it's addressing the needs of our, frontline customers who need more help and not just providing a discount to everybody. The first slide of this deck, shows that we've delivered over $10 million in bill savings across all of our customers. That's what we do. We are here to provide lower cost and greener electricity. So we're trying to provide a benefit to everybody. This Connected Communities program is really specifically focused on the customers who need that help. And so this is not, we're not planning on bringing something to the board. We already have a Connected Communities program, and debt relief is one tool in that broader framework of our Connected Communities work.
That was an excellent answer. The only thing, and I do support what you said, only thing is, I don't know if the concierge, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but for those customers that are on the 12-month program, if there's any way that we or, your concierge could assist that customer, when they find themselves in difficulty with that second payment, so that they're able to get the benefit of the 12-month relief, that particular item, that particular section, if there's anything that can be done there, I would appreciate it. So
Yes, that is why we have identified that as a role for our call center representatives, is that specific item. I monitor people's payments. If they're missing a payment, figure out how to help them fix that. That is completely in alignment with what our plan is.
Thank you.
We can't guarantee it, but that's the goal.
All right, thank you.
All right, do we have any other comments from members of the committee? I see no hands. I do see Jessica's hand up. Given that I know she has a big interest in this, let's go ahead and give her 2 minutes, and then we're gonna do our last item.
Great, thank you. Jessica Tovar, you're recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, Jessica Tovar. On behalf of East Bay Clean Power Alliance, I really want to thank East Bay Community Energy, specifically JP Ross and his team, Local Development Business Plan, folks who are really taking this on. And we're really happy with this program because, coming into January, we were really concerned about, the debt that folks have accrued and the situation where they're facing the moratorium potentially ending the end of this month. And then that means that power shutoffs would potentially take place starting next month. So I also wanted to highlight that we're also addressing this issue on a national and state level. If you check out our website, there's information. We are having a press conference event tomorrow at 11 a.m. So please check out localcleanenergy.org for information for that. And please join us because this is a national issue. It's water, it's gas, it's broadband, it's electricity. Folks are really struggling right now. We need our government to pay attention to that and to help us alleviate that because the pandemic, it was a life and death situation. We've already been through too much. I know several people who have died my age, who I grew up with, a lot of grief, a lot of job loss. Again, we've been through too much, and the last thing we need is for these folks to experience power shutoffs after all of that devastation. So please check out localcleanenergy.org and join us tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you all. This was an informational item, and Cynthia, thank you for bringing it up. I'm sorry it took me 2 months to get it on our agenda. I'm going to move on to our last item, which is item C9. This is member and staff announcements, including request to place items on future CAC agendas. Do I have, Cynthia, your hand is up. Is that for this item or is that leftover?
It's probably a leftover, but I want to thank Monica for her service on the board. I've really appreciated Monica's expertise and outlook. So thank you, Monica, and best of luck to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Seeing none, I will adjourn our meeting. We are next meeting Monday, July 19th. Talk to you all then. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mary.
Guys.